So today I wanted to review how to find the greatest common factor as well as the least common multiple of a set of numbers. Sometimes you might have 2, 3, or even 4 numbers. Using a factor tree is really a great way to find the least common multiple and greatest common factor of a set of numbers. Now what's important is that you don't mix up the difference between greatest common factor and least common multiple, because they're different ideas and they're different procedures. The greatest common factor is basically the biggest number, the biggest whole number that can be divided into a set of numbers. Least common multiple is the lowest common number that all the numbers share when multiplied by a number that is greater than 1. For example, do they share something when multiplied by 2, by 3, by 4, etc. So now that we've reviewed a little bit of the vocabulary, let's first look on finding greatest common factor. So finding the greatest common factor, GCF is often an abbreviation we use, of 68 and 72. These are rather large numbers. We don't want to list out all of the factors and find the greatest common factor. But we can find a factor tree. So looking at the factor trees, we can then split them up. So 68 can be split up. So we can split it up as 2 times 34. We notice that the 34, when we're doing prime factorization, can also be split up because it's even. This can be split up into 2 times 17. So now we have the prime factorization of 68. Now looking at 72, so we have 8 times 9 is a common number that we can use. Now both of these numbers can be split up. We have 2 times 4 here, 3 times 3. The 4 can be further split up into 2 times 2. So now I have my prime factorization of 72. Looking at these numbers, to find the greatest common factor, I look at the number that is the greatest out of the two. So I look at what I have on this side. I have a 2 here and here. I have a second 2 here and here. Now I also have a 2, a 3, and a 17, but I don't have those shared on both sides. They must be shared. So then I just look at what I have in common. I have a 2 and I have another 2. So my greatest common factor is those numbers multiplied together, which is 4. So the greatest common factor between 68 and 72 equals 4. So that is the greatest common factor. Now let's go on to least common multiple. When we find the least common multiple, we can use a factor tree the same way, only we're going to look at the numbers differently. So because it's good for us, let's factor out 68 and 72. So we have 2 times 34, and then we have 2 times 17. That's my prime factorization. For 72, we remember, hopefully, let's look at this in a different way. We can do 6 times 12, just to show you how you can split numbers up differently. 2 times 3, 2 times 6, and split up the 6. Get 2 times 3 again. And we have 2's and 3's. So when we factor these out, we look at them a little differently. So then you look at all the numbers that you have when you're finding least common multiple. I have a 2 to the second power times 17 for my prime factorization. Here I have 2 to the third power times 3 to the second power for my prime factorization. Then I look at all the numbers that I have in common. Actually, the ones not necessarily that you have in common, all the different numbers that you have. We have a 2, we have a 3, and we have a 17. So again, we have a 2, a 3, and a 17. Then I look at the exponents and I say, okay, which is my higher exponent, 2 or 3? In this case, of course, 3 is higher. 3 to the second power only has second power, so that exponent I keep. 17 stays the same. Then I'm going to multiply these numbers together. So order of operations says, of course, that I do the exponents first. So I'm going to get, and I'll write it up higher a little bit, 2 to the third power, which is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. 3 to the second power, which is 3 times 3 of 9, times 17. Then we can multiply from left to right. 8 times 9 is 72, and 72 times 17, we're going to have to do the old-fashioned way, and we're going to get 1,224. So you can see how a factor tree, when you have numbers like this, can really help you, especially when finding the least common multiple, because if you had to list out all the multiples until you got to 1,224, it might drive you crazy. So I hope this helps you in finding a shortcut, especially when dealing with massive numbers. So remember, least common multiple is the lowest common number that the numbers will share when multiplied by a number greater than 1, of course. And greatest common factor is the biggest number that can be divided into those numbers. When you're trying to figure out the difference in strategies, think greatest common factor. Factors should be smaller than multiples, typically. So if you get an answer like for least common multiple of 4, you might want to double check to make sure you didn't find the greatest common factor. So I hope those strategies have helped you.